Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Oliver, for that kind introduction. And thank you to all of you for being here at the start of the week when we're not always so enthusiastic about everything as we are on a Friday. What can I say? We've just had one of those quiet, serene weekends in British politics. And I tell you never quite know what is going to happen in this job that I do as a politician. And I was actually, of course, I'm talking about Ian Duncan Smith's resignation. And I was actually booked to do, provisionally, the Andrew Marr show myself yesterday. And I got bumped. I got bumped for John Major. And I thought, well, he's a former Prime Minister, fair enough. And then he got bumped for Ian Duncan Smith. And if anyone knows about the history of those two, it's a bit like history repeating itself. But given that the subject of the speech that I'm giving to you this morning, it's actually all rather timely. I'm not usually prone to giving thanks for the actions of Ian Duncan Smith. But on the Andrew Marr show yesterday, IDS spoke about this notion, of one nation Britain. One nation Britain. Now, there'll be those who dismiss it as a soundbite or worse, an offensive label for the right-wing agenda the former Welfare Secretary has been pursuing since 2010. That's a point of view. But there is a reason why it is one nation, why it is a mantle that both my party, the Labour Party, and the Conservatives have sought to rightly own. That is because it is how we like to see our country. It is an expression that sums up the national unity we saw at moments like the 2012 Olympics. However, if we're honest, it's an aspiration and not a reality in Britain today, which is what I want to talk about and focus on, our need to become a more socially integrated country. So cast your mind back to those fantastic London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. That summer, I think we can all agree, brought out the best in Britain. Through Danny Boyle's brilliant opening ceremony, we paid tribute to the NHS, an institution that binds us together as a society. We celebrated the arrival of the Empire Windrush, the ship which carried 500 immigrants in 1948 from the West Indies to Tilbury Docks. A lot of those then came and settled here in my borough of Lambeth. This heralded a new generation of immigrants who would profoundly change the demographic and cultural landscape of the UK. Throughout the Games, our country was united in support of a team which seemed to truly embody 21st century Britain. The spirit and buzz of the occasion was infectious, it was unforgettable. And on one particular memorable Saturday, Super Saturday, who remembers Super Saturday? I was lucky enough to be there. We cheered on the gold medal winning performances of a mixed race woman from Sheffield, a one-time Somali refugee from London, and a red-headed guy from Milton Keynes. And for a moment in time, we seemed and felt wholly comfortable in our own skin. We presented ourselves as a country at peace with mixed modern Britain, which we've become, a society which was no longer particularly bothered about a person's social background or ethnicity, a diverse, integrated, confident Britain ready for the challenges of a new century. Yet, as I reflect on the 2012 Olympics in 2016, as I said, I can't help but feel that unifying spirit which energised communities across the UK that summer, that seemed to reflect our ideals and our aspirations as a society, but not really the reality of life in our country. The day before those games began, the Prime Minister said there was no more diverse, more open, more tolerant city in the world than London. Now, I'm not a fan of the notion that we tolerate each other. I'd much rather we embrace others and their cultures, but I agree with his essential sentiment. However, being open and diverse, it's not the same as knowing and trusting each other. Take London. New research released by The Challenge today shows that there is a growing gap between the experiences of people from different socio-economic groups here in our nation's capital, a place that we thought was a bastion for integration. Whilst the majority of poor Londoners say they don't feel at home in their city and feel excluded from the life of their community, those with wealth report feeling a sense of belonging and safety in their neighbourhoods. So even in our Olympic city, our society is becoming increasingly divided. Throughout the lifetime of the baby boomer generation, Britain has become brilliantly diverse, and our lives have become less uniform in a number of ways. We've gone from being an overwhelmingly white nation to one where 14% of the population is made up of ethnic minority Britons. Many of our cities, our towns, our villages have got people of every colour, every creed in them. By 2050, the proportion of residents who will be of an ethnic British residents who will be of an ethnic minority background will double, looking at around 38% by 2050. Over the last half century, the middle class has exploded in size, creating new opportunities for people to chart their own path in life. And scientific and social advances mean that more of us are having children later in life and living into old age, fundamentally changing the way in which different generations relate to one another in the UK. By 2040, the number of people aged 75 and over will rise by 89%, and fewer older people will be living in the same town as their children and grandchildren. But last year's report by the Social Integration Commission, which Oliver mentioned, shows that levels of integration haven't kept pace with our growing diversity. Too often, people from different ethnic, class, and age groups are living side by side, but they aren't actually mixing with one another and leading interconnected lives. And there are worrying signs that the income and lifestyle gap between the rich and poor in society may continue to widen. As long as a country is diverse but divided in this way, we can't honestly claim to be that bastion of unity and successful multiculturalism which seemed to shine so brightly when we were Olympic Britain. So why is this all happening? I don't think it's necessarily a conscious or deliberate thing, but I think the divisions arise from a range of factors. Undoubtedly, the winds of change are blowing through our country at a remarkable speed. Some of the biggest changes to the ways in which different groups relate to one another can't really be charted on a graphic, and are challenges really that we're only just waking up to. Conflict abroad and the terrible consequences of climate change may drive more refugees to our shores than ever before. Increased competition from emerging markets and dramatic technological advances could make work more insecure for more and more British workers, and the automation of more of the jobs that computers can't do now may transform our economy and lead us to rethink how we organise ourselves as a society. Now, I believe that we're at a crossroads. If we don't take action now to bridge these divides in our communities, I fear they will grow into gulfs. There is a real risk that the British people could respond to the challenges of the 21st century, all these changes that I'm talking about, not by asking how can we solve these problems together, but by asking who can we blame? Who can we blame? That is precisely what is happening in the United States right now. Populist parties, which typify this, are actually already in national and or regional governments in Europe, like the Front National in France. Some say it wouldn't fly here, wouldn't fly in modern Britain, that people could never stomach a prime minister in the mould of Donald Trump. I really hope that is the case. Could you imagine a Donald Trump as our prime minister? A major party leader who would slander and stigmatise a whole faith group and advocate building a wall to keep immigrants out of our country, who would say anything to get elected and bully and shout down anyone who spoke up against them. But we're already on that slippery slope. Last year's general election and the European elections the year before should have been a wake-up call to the growing and pernicious divides in our national politics. Think about it, nearly 4 million of our fellow citizens voted for a party whose leader got stuck in a traffic jam and blamed the traffic on immigrants. A leader who brought up the idea of stopping immigrants with life-threatening illnesses from entering our country during the first TV leaders debate during that general election. And that was an election which more than ever before seemed to be fought on a region-by-region and group-by-group basis, where the political and cultural divides between the north and the south of England, as well as Scotland and England, which could become yet more stark, where the class divides, which have always been a part of Britain's history, gained renewed and far greater prominence, and where the differences between the urban here and the rural seem bigger than ever before. Now, if we continue down this path, we could face nothing less than the Trumpification of British democracy, as it were. Now, I saw this myself in the run-up to the general election. As I travelled around the country as a shadow business secretary, I was confronted time and time again with the reality that here, just like in the States, people are losing faith in the idea that politics can make a difference to their lives. It's exactly that sort of despondency that drives people to turn to the populist politics of the left and of the right, of blame, division, and recrimination. In towns and cities, from Brighton to Sunderland, I met people who were afraid, people who were angry. Afraid because the world is changing in ways that they feel are beyond their control. Angry because what it means to be British, or more specifically English, seems to have shifted around them. Their sense of identity, of belonging, seems to be under threat. And look, in an era of globalization, I think we've got to be honest as policymakers, that in an era of globalization and a rapidly changing world, there are some things that we just can't stop. But we can help to come together as communities and to collectively take steps to shape the future. Now, to achieve this, we cannot duck having an open and honest conversation about why we've stopped trusting each other as citizens and neighbours. There is no point simply complaining about what we're seeing happening. It's beholden on all of us to better understand what is going on so that we can build those bonds of trust and the strong social ties our communities are going to need to flourish in the future. I had the pleasure of meeting the Harvard-based sociologist Robert Putnam at the end of last year. Through his research, he has shown that where people from different ethnicities live side by side but don't mix in meaningful ways, trust is eroded. Then here, in their groundbreaking book, The Spirit Level, Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson have proven that areas with high levels of class inequality also suffer from low levels of trust. And we know, through lots of research, that a lack of contact between the old and young increases fear of crime amongst older people and creates a situation where too many are automatically and unfairly labelled as troublesome simply for committing the crime of being young. So our diverse but socially segregated state here is sapping our communities of trust, it's undermining our ability to count on each other. Now, this matters because in an uncertain and changing world, it's all too easy to imagine that our problems are the fault of those who are different from us. As we've become less familiar with one another, I think it's become harder for us to understand where people who come from a different background are coming from, where they're coming from on the big issues. And the disharmony of our political debate has stopped us from taking action together to address the discord which exists in our communities. We have got to get to grips with the fact that as we've changed as a country, we've come to know and understand one another less and less. Take the issue of immigration. Throughout the last 40 years, the debate on immigration has become increasingly polarised to the point that it's now dominated by two hopelessly opposed views, by one group of voices claiming that Britain is full and it's time to shut our borders, and another insisting that there's no problem, who say that immigrants in the vast majority of Britons rub along together okay, and it's only a fundamentally backwards and prejudiced minority who have an issue with that. Now, let me be clear. Look at me. I'm the son of an immigrant. I only have to visit Streatham High Road in my own constituency to see firsthand the vibrancy and dynamism which immigration has infused into our communities, and what a fantastic force it's been for the cultural life of our country. I know that. And when I've witnessed a stream of prejudice uttered by political candidates for elected office, sitting politicians, including in my own party, where I've seen people peddle fear and prejudice, I've been unafraid of calling them out. But those of us who champion the benefits of immigration, and I do, and diversity, also need to recognise that rapid demographic change can put enormous pressure on local public services and threaten people's sense of security and belonging. My own party has too often shut its ears to these concerns. Labour has rightly argued that immigration has brought real economic benefits to our country, but that's an accountant's answer to a question which goes to the heart of how people feel about modern Britain. Our failure to confront head-on the fact that our country hasn't lived up to the Olympic ideal has at times caused us to unfairly dismiss reasonable concerns about the impact of immigration on our communities. Now, of course, we need to be wary of the threat posed by petty nationalism. I talked about the Front National earlier. We are not going to solve the challenges we face through resorting to that sort of scapegoating, which the UK has such a proud history of fighting against. And yes, I do worry that some of the interventions we've heard in the ongoing EU referendum debate have been purposefully designed to stoke prejudice. You know, some of the rhetoric which we've heard about Polish people, about Romanian people, really isn't that dissimilar to the kind of rhetoric deployed against black and Asian people in decades past. But we mustn't lump all those who voice concerns about the consequences of immigration into the same basket. It's not racist to want to be able to speak the same language as your next door neighbour or the other parents at the school gate. It is not unreasonable or prejudiced to worry about your community changing around you. Our inability to have a grown-up conversation about the way immigration is changing our country and the fact that we can't seem to get our heads around another one's point of view has led to extreme views developing on both sides of the argument. We argue endlessly and endlessly about who we should let into our country, how many, and why. But we haven't really spent enough time thinking about, well, what happens when immigrants enter our country and settle in, say, Middlesbrough, Newham, Glasgow, wherever it might be? We don't really do that. In order to detoxify the debate, we need to own up to the fact that immigration can undermine community cohesion, but that it doesn't have to, and recognise there's a middle way between shutting our borders and shutting our ears to people's concerns. We need to have a concerted drive to break down barriers to integration and provide much better support to immigrants, not only to learn English and understand British values, but also meet and mix and build relationships with Britons of all backgrounds. Integration, after all, it's a two-way street. Because we know that it's when people with different experience of life get to know one another and lead interconnected lives, that is when trust grows. We need to give our communities much more support to build these bonds of trust in the face of change and to better manage differences in all forms. Which brings me to class differences. Rising inequality is one of the most pressing problems facing our nation, and it is compounded by the growing class segregation that we see amongst different groups. It's no wonder we've ended up with TV programs like Benefit Street. Think about it, Benefit Street, which is produced by well-paid people who are not on benefits, but it is a program that treats people who claim unemployment benefit like they are different species. It's no wonder that so many more column inches in the newspapers are devoted to those who stand accused of cheating the benefit system than middle-class bankers who dishonestly rig an entire financial system at everyone else's expense. It's no wonder we have an utterly toxic political debate on social security, which too often ignores the impact of low-paid work and the cost of living and ducks the challenges of addressing the real barriers which people face in getting back to work. Now, I talked about our friend Ian Duncan Smith, who I would say has presided over the biggest programme of misery for the disabled, the poor and those in need in a generation. But for me, actually, okay, it's a good thing that he's recanted and said that what they have been doing is unfair and arbitrary. But the greatest sadness, it's not that he left it so long to say that, but it is that in spite of him saying that about government policy, the polls tell us the harsh policy agenda he has pursued for some time now commands some considerable public support. Research by the Social Integration Commission provides an insight into why this might be the case. They show that middle class and working class people in this country are leading very separate lives, and that far too few people who are in work know anyone who is on benefits at all. So it's clear that we as a country face many challenges, but looking around this room, looking at the challenge, at the brilliant social entrepreneurs and innovators who have pioneered initiatives to build bridges between different groups in society, and the young people who have got stuck into their local communities and participated in programs like the National Citizenship Service, I really, truly believe we have it in us to rise to the test and fulfil that promise of Olympic Britain. I'm proud to announce today, as Oliver said, that we are launching a new cross-party group, the All Party Parliamentary Group for Social Segregation, to explore how we can tackle this, how we can build a more integrated Britain. I know that our first step must be to learn the lessons of the past, not least that rather than telling people what unites them, as politicians quite like to do, our group should look at how we can help people from all walks of life to meet, to mix, and work it out for themselves. That's why we will focus on ideas to create the shared experiences which enable people to develop shared identities. These experiences must be woven into the fabric of everyday life in our country. We are looking forward to engaging with the government's review into integration and opportunity, which Louise Casey is leading. She will be one of the first witnesses we call on to give evidence at our public hearings. And this is cross-party, and I think that's important because we need to set an example in working together in an integrated fashion to find solutions to these problems. I've warned we're on the verge of the Trumpification of British politics, and I believe it's incumbent on politicians to work together and show leadership in the face of this challenge. You see, by building a more integrated Britain, we can grow trust in our communities and restore our sense of common British life. We can choose a politics of unity and cooperation over a politics of division and blame. Now, don't get me wrong, politics in diverse societies invariably involves challenging conversations and sometimes painful compromise between different groups and interests. It's muddled, it's often a messy activity, as you've seen over the weekend, in which people usually have to settle for less than the perfect realisation of their ideals. But it's only by coming together as a democracy that we can move forward into the future as one country. And at its best, politics is in itself a way of getting to know one another better, of glimpsing the world through another's eyes, and of growing through the experience. If we as a country are going to take the challenges of the 21st century head on, if we're going to weather the changes before us and flourish in the face of an uncertain future, if we're going to live up to the Olympic ideal for real and figure out what together we can become, this is a sort of big, compassionate, joined-up politics we need. And I'm very much looking forward to getting your thoughts on all of that. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.